This edition of MacVoices is supported by you, our viewers and listeners, through our Patreon and PayPal sponsorship options. To learn more, visit macvoices.com/support. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, as we record this, we're only a couple days after Apple announced the discontinuation of the HomePod, and the first thing I thought about was, well, I'm disappointed, and the second thing I thought about was Kirk McElhearn. So Kirk is here to talk to us about losing the HomePod. Kirk, welcome. It's great to have you back, as always.
Hi, Chuck. Nice to be here again. Losing the HomePod? You haven't lost yours yet. It's still there. No one's come into your home and stolen your HomePod, have they?
No, they haven't. But, I guess I was disappointed in this because I have the HomePod and the HomePod Mini. I love the Mini, no question about it. But I love the sound of the HomePod more. And so to see this Apple decide to discontinue this was a bit of a surprise and frankly, a bit of a disappointment.
I think we react in a strange way when tech is discontinued like this. It's not going to stop working tomorrow. I'm kind of convinced that Apple's going to keep updating it or at least maintaining it for years like they have with some of the older Airport Express devices. You can't buy a new one, okay, but it's not like the thing you bought doesn't work anymore. Although I'm going to tell you a secret. I have two large HomePods. I have two HomePod minis. As soon as the HomePod is no longer available, I'm going to sell my HomePods on eBay. It's not that I'm particularly worried about what I just said, but I know that if I buy a pair of Sonos Ones to replace the HomePods, that Sonos is in it for the long term. They're not going to discontinue that. For Apple, the HomePod is like a secondary thing. It's a blip on their balance sheet. For Sonos, their audio products are everything that they do. Apple tried to get into this market for two reasons. One, for the audio side, because Apple since 2001 has been mostly about audio. Everything other than computers is like iPod and AirPods and all of that. But it just wasn't a device that fit into Apple's product line. Now, they needed a smart speaker that worked with Siri because, everyone was selling smart speakers, and Amazon was selling gazillions of them for as low as $25 each. But I think Apple misjudged the market. They thought that people would be willing to pay a huge price. Was it $349 when it first launched? For a device that would provide extraordinary sound with this cutting edge technology, and most people don't care. They listen to music on Bluetooth speakers. They just don't care. I'm not a big Siri user, so I have Siri turned off on everything except to push the button on my phone when I need to ask a question. I know from experience with other people, they're not happy with the way Siri works on the HomePod. It was a device from the very beginning. I was sort of ambivalent about it because you think it sounds great. I don't. I don't like the overly bassy sound. How can a $350 speaker from Apple not have settings to adjust the EQ, at least the bass and treble? And if you set up a stereo pair, to adjust the balance. How can they not do that? That's like shipping a text editor and not letting people change the font size. That's like the basics in music. And I find that really disappointing that Apple was saying, you can have any audio signature you want as long as it's ours. You have to like the way we shape the music, which it's bass heavy. It's forceful. It's designed for the type of music that Apple promotes on Apple Music, rap and loud pop and that sort of thing. It really does not sound good with string quartets, orchestral music, some kinds of jazz, any kind of subtle music. It just doesn't have what it takes to balance out the different tones. Personally, I find the Sonos Ones sound better out of the box, and you have EQ settings and you have balance settings.
Okay, so let me hit you with a bunch of things there. First of all, I felt like, I did have some control over balancing those things within some of the music apps.
If you make a stereo pair of HomePods, you can't adjust the balance. I'm talking the left-right balance.
Okay, but you can tweak with the EQ settings.
You can only do that in the settings from, say, your iOS device or in the music app on the Mac. And that's only for music coming from Apple's apps. If you're using like the Spotify app, I don't know if they offer EQ settings, but the global EQ settings don't apply to that. So you don't. It should be upfront. Here's your HomePod. Here are the settings to make it sound exactly the way you want, and particularly the balance for a stereo pair. It's not easy to be in a position. Do you think your living room, your bedroom, whatever, where you want a stereo pair of speakers to be perfectly in the center? Now, when I got the first HomePod, I thought I liked the idea. Too expensive. The sound signature is not for me. When I got the second, I was pleasantly surprised that it did sound much better in a stereo pair than it was like. It wasn't twice a HomePod. It was like 2.5 times a HomePod. That the sound was a lot more enveloping. They have a sort of faux 3D sound type thing, which isn't disagreeable. But the lack of, channel balance means that in a stereo pair, you just may not be in the right position. And you certainly heard one of our Next Track podcast episodes last year where we talked about the tyranny of the sweet spot. And I've come to think that whole problem with stereo is that you have to be in that position. My co-host Doug Adams and I, we did an experiment where we took two speakers and put them together, pointing outward, to get stereo sound like that. I would almost welcome a really good mono speaker, because the HomePod's mono, if it offered sound adjustments, because then, like I have one in the living room. I don't care if I'm right in the perfect, isosceles triangle sweet spot and all that. But it just doesn't do it for me. It just doesn't have. I want something that sounds good with all the music I listen to, not just some.
And I remember that episode of the podcast when you all were talking about angling speakers, putting them together, facing away from each, doing all kind of crazy geometries that I would never have thought of. And, that too is one of those things that I intended to get to and never kind of got to try out because, but you are absolutely right. The number of times that I sit down in front of a pair of stereo speakers strictly to listen to music, I can count on one hand last year, and we were in lockdown.
Yeah.
So, I had theoretically, I had more time, and it just doesn't happen. So I'm with you, and I think that's one of the reasons that I like the HomePod so much is that I felt like, yeah, I have two, and I have them set up as a stereo pair. And for those few times that you even if you just walk through the sweet spot, it's like, oh yeah, I really should spend more time here.
Yeah.
But they sound good, and you and I have a little bit different tastes in music.
You're into metal. Loud.
I'm
you
into
want the bass.
I want the bass, but I don't want it to be rap like bass that just distorts. And so I did a side by side to the HomePod and the Sonos One because I have a Sonos One as well, and I like the HomePod better. And now I'm afraid. Now I'm a slave to that mindset because if I listen to the Sonos One alone, it's fine. But I keep thinking it could be a little more HomePod like, and maybe
But have you tried adjusting the EQ on the Sonos One?
I have not. So to be fair,
in the app you have basic bass and treble adjustments, and that can make a big difference because these are small speakers. Now the HomePod does have a bigger woofer, right? So it's got a woofer and 7 tweeters around it. The Sonos One has one smaller woofer and a single tweeter, but these are small speakers, so you're not going to get a lot of bass. And that's the problem with the HomePod is it's kind of exaggerating the bass because I think the people at Apple felt that room-filling sound, in air quotes, has to be very bassy. And I don't agree with that. Room-filling sound has to sound natural, whatever natural is. We can't actually hear what an orchestra sounds like in your home, but you know what I mean? You shouldn't hear part of the music above the rest of the music unless that's the way it was performed and recorded. And with the HomePod, as I said, string quartets sound terrible for some reason. It just can't handle the close overlapping frequencies of a string quartet. Piano music sounds generally pretty good because piano doesn't go too low. But it really depends. You take a jazz piano trio, and sometimes the bass is way too present and just overwhelms the low end of the piano. I mean, my big gripe, again, comes back to price. At $350, which then dropped to, $300, it's overpriced for what it does. The Sonos One, I think, is $179 now. But I think you can get the Sonos One without without the microphone for Alexa for 159. So Sonos's logic is if you're having a stereo pair, you don't need Alexa microphones on both of them. So you can buy a pair, which is one which does have the microphone and the other that doesn't. So you can save money on that. And if you can buy two Sonos Ones for the price of one HomePod, I think that's a much better deal.
Yeah, and that's part of the discussion I definitely want to have here is, what should people be talking about for replacements? Because I admit I got used to having Siri available to me where the HomePods are. And of course now it's available where the HomePod minis are. But I felt like I for one was very, very happy with the performance of Siri on the HomePod. So that was me.
I think it varies a lot among people about the kind of things they want and the questions they ask and all that. But let me ask you something. How many Apple devices do you have that can perform Siri actions?
More than I'm going to acknowledge on this podcast.
So my curiosity was, who's going to spend $350 for a smart speaker when they have to be Apple users to use it, right? So they've already got at least an iPhone, Apple Watch, or whatever, which can do Siri. If your iPhone's nearby, you use that for Siri. Why do you want to use the HomePod for it? If you've got an Apple Watch, which I think you do, then you've got Siri on your wrist all the time. So there was this overlap of functionality that they were saying, yes, you need this smart speaker, but you don't need it because you're already an Apple user.
Yeah, I agree. I sort of subscribe to Brian Chaffin's thing where he wants to be anywhere in his house, talk into the air, and have it respond. And in theory, you can do that with a watch or the phone, but that means I've got to have the watch or the phone with me or on. With the HomePod, I didn't feel like I had that.
Yeah, but that means you need a HomePod in every room of the house.
Well, yeah, that's true.
Which is more onerous, wearing your watch or buying 7 HomePods if you have 7 rooms in your house?
Well, and
plus when you're outdoors, the HomePod won't work.
That's true. And I would have been going with the minis, to fill the house. I wouldn't have been going with the main HomePod. So I still can have what I want. I just don't have.
But no, you just said it. You wouldn't be going with the main HomePods.
Right.
So since Apple released the HomePod Mini at $99, which is probably still a bit overpriced, but okay, $99 is all right. I think it's the cheapest Apple device that actually does something. Right. For less than that, you can get the pencil's more expensive. You can get adapters and dongles, but they don't do anything on their own. For $99, now that makes more sense. Let's say you want a speaker in the living room that anyone can control with Siri, and you're not really concerned about the music quality. That to me makes sense as a Siri device. But the original HomePod was the price of let's say a medium high-end speaker, because for most people, a speaker that they'll buy for the home is, a Bluetooth speaker, less than $100. So the price of a medium high-end speaker was for people who wanted something to do with audio quality, whereas now we have the HomePod Mini. It kind of proves my point that the HomePod Maxi wasn't selling. It wasn't the audio quality that was convincing people, but the HomePod Mini is very successful. In fact, I read a lot of people on the internet. I bought 6 of them. I bought 8 of them. They're buying, dozens of them to put around the house, which personally, I don't want things all around the house listening to me, but whatevs.
Well, I know that I agree with you on the music quality thing. And it's a disappointment to me because I would like to have thought that people were just a little more discerning. But the number of people that I had tell me that they had one of the little Echo Dots. And that's fine for listening. And I mean, I was like horrified. It's like a 1965 Volkswagen radio.
Right, but you and I grew up when people's music source was a 1965 Volkswagen radio.
Yeah,
I mean, how many people did you know that had car stereos that were anything other than what came with their cars? And back in the day, the default car stereo wasn't very good.
Yeah, but I really did believe that the general public had developed more of an appreciation, and I guess I was just flat out wrong.
I like to think the whole 80-20 rule, I think it's not necessarily scientific, but I think it's valid in some cases. I think 80% of people use music as background music, as wallpaper. So they don't really care how good it sounds. Remember when we were growing up, you had to have a stereo in the living room or in your bedroom. You had to have a stereo with the amplifier, the receiver, the turntable, the speakers, and everything. We're past that. People never really needed them. Do you remember how many people, as you got into your 30s and 40s, how many people had the stereos in the living room and never used them? It's because they just didn't listen to music very much. They would listen on a car radio, they'd listen on a transistor radio in the kitchen or whatever, but they wouldn't use the stereo. I think it's too easy for people who really like music to think that everyone else thinks like them, that this is how everyone should be listening to music. Look at the popularity of little Bluetooth speakers. It's clear that people want the freedom of portability more than they want the sound quality. Sonos just announced a new thing, the Sonos Roam, which is this nice Toblerone-looking triangular speaker. I think it's $179 or something like that. And what's great about it is it's not just a Bluetooth speaker, but it can work on Wi-Fi if it's in your house. It detects the network. And I suspect this is going to be a really good sounding speaker. And the advantage here is if you want to use it in your home, you put it in whatever room you're going to be in. So you don't need a fixed speaker. Plus, you can use it outside. Now, I've got a patio in my garden. We put up a gazebo last summer, a thing to keep the sun off us and everything. And it's about 20, 30 feet away from the house. And I thought, I want to get something to put music on there. And I bought a little Bluetooth speaker, and it sounds okay. But I like the idea of that new Sonos Roam to give me, good quality music outside, or good enough, rather than the tiny, tinny, overly bassy Bluetooth speaker. So I think Apple should have a Bluetooth speaker. The problem is they won't. Bluetooth, as you know, it's always a lossy compression format to send the music from your device to the speaker. Apple doesn't want to do that. They want AirPlay. And I don't think they're going to come out with like a portable, like what Sonos just did, that would do Wi-Fi with AirPlay as well as Bluetooth. They've never really the Bluetooth speaker for them isn't what they want to do. Now, to be fair, since they've come out with the AirPods and all the various AirPod devices, which are Bluetooth, maybe they will do something like that because they can implement a better Bluetooth, like a lossless Bluetooth.
So you've taken me somewhere that I wanted to definitely get, and that is to talk about AirPlay 2. And okay, so now the HomePod, if the HomePod Mini doesn't satisfy me, and the HomePod is no longer available, obviously you've mentioned the Sonos One. What do I need to look for in a speaker, and what do I get out of that when it comes to AirPlay 2?
Well, you need to look for an AirPlay 2 compatible speaker. The Sonos One is AirPlay 2 compatible. The Sonos Play 1 was not. It was AirPlay 1 compatible. And AirPlay 2 gives you the ability to choose multiple speakers. So with Sonos, you can choose multiple speakers if you're playing from their app. But what I do is I use my Sonos devices playing just from my iPhone, like with the Apple Music app. And using the AirPlay implementation on the iPhone, I can choose multiple speakers if I want. You set up the stereo pair of the Sonos speakers in the Sonos app, but then they're recognized as a pair by any device that uses AirPlay. So AirPlay 2 is by far better than AirPlay 1. You don't get as many dropouts and lags, and there's better buffering. There's a lot of technical things in the background, but the real advantage is the multi-speaker ability that you get with AirPlay 2. I don't think there are a lot of modern speakers coming out these days that are new that won't have AirPlay 2, that will have the older implementation of AirPlay.
So you mentioned the stereo pair part. So what am I buying with AirPlay 2? Is it because it's not Bluetooth.
And no, so it's over Wi-Fi.
Right. So am I getting
AirPlay goes over Wi-Fi? You're getting lossless audio.
So I am getting lossless audio. So I'm not having that Bluetooth compression issue. I'm actually getting more information delivered to the speaker.
Right. So what happens is, let's say you're on your Mac and you're playing music from the Music app, and you're playing music from Apple Music, which is 256K AAC. When you send it over AirPlay 1 or AirPlay 2, the Music app or the Mac, the framework on your Mac, converts it to Apple lossless audio. So you're not losing any quality. And when it gets to the target speaker, it's converted automatically into analog from that lossless stream. What that means is if you're playing lossless audio on your Mac, it gets sent lossless. If you're playing 128K MP3, it gets uncompressed, sort of, into lossless before being played on the speakers.
Okay.
So you never have a recompression after that. On the contrary, with Bluetooth, your audio is compressed into a different type of codec, and in most cases you won't hear it. But if it's a low quality source audio, you might get some artifacts coming out of the speaker. But then the speaker would have to be good enough for you to hear that difference.
So other than the Sonos One, do you have any speakers that you have had experience with or that have really good reputations that we should be looking at as opposed to the HomePod now that it's not available?
The problem in the audio world is that there are tons of little speakers of the same kind. No, they really are. In the past few years, they've just been sprouting up all over the place like daffodils in spring. For me, there's two things to look at. There's the quality of the speaker, what it does, but there's the quality of the company behind them. Sonos, I've had a lot of criticism of certain things Sonos has done in the past, but I see them as a forward-looking company, and I'm willing to trust them and invest into their products. I know that they're going to keep maintaining these. We had this thing a year or so ago where they cut off older products, and that was a bit of I think they handled it not very well. But going forward, I think they're committed to the long term with these things. I would be a lot more hesitant to buy, I don't know, a speaker from some random speaker company that says, right, here we've got this little speaker and here it is, it's AirPlay, it's Bluetooth and whatever. I'd be less inclined to spend more money not knowing how long they're going to support it.
Okay.
Sonos has a large installed base that's bought speakers over a long period of time, and that they want to keep these people buying stuff more and more and more over time, and they're going to be supporting these speakers as long as possible. Random audio companies, which may be excellent audio companies, aren't really doing the same thing.
And we had this discussion before on a previous edition of MacVoices, the idea that you need support for these speakers, be it Sonos, be it Apple, be it whoever. It's not a case of just running some heavy gauge speaker wire to it anymore and plugging it in, especially if you're going with the electronic speakers and the AirPlay 2 and Bluetooth and all that, that there has to be some support for these things.
Yeah. The only other company I would look to, and I'm very tempted, is a British company called KEF, K-E-F. And they have a couple of different speakers that are, you know what active speakers are, right?
Mm-hmm.
So active speakers have amplifiers in the speakers, and a HomePod is an active speaker, and a Sonos One is an active speaker. But in audiophile speak, an active speaker is something where the amplifier is really tuned to the speaker itself. You get these for studio use. Mackie has these studio monitors that cost, a couple $1,000s for a pair because they're really good quality, perfectly balanced amplification. So KEF has a couple of speakers. One is the LSX let's see, I'm looking on their website. It is about £1,000 a pair. Not sure what the US price is. The new LS50 Wireless 2 is way out of my price range at $2,250 a pair. I have a pair of KEF speakers, normal speakers here in my office, and I really like them. They're really neutral. I've heard so many good things from people I trust about these KEF wireless speakers that I would be tempted. But if I look at it, in my office, I've got two audio setups. One is on my desk and another is over on the side there, so I can sit in my comfy chair and read and listen to music. That one has a pair of KEF speakers that cost about £400, and it's powered by a Sonos amp that costs £600. So that's the same price as the two KEF wireless speakers at £1,000. So replacing an amp and speakers by speakers doesn't make any sense, and buying the speakers and not using the amp doesn't make any sense. I mean, I use that amp both for the speakers on my desk and the speakers over there. I use a switcher for the speakers, but you're paying a premium for that sort of wireless speaker. You're paying the premium of not having the amplifier and the speaker wires, right? And we see this with the HomePod, a single HomePod or whatever. But look at a pair of HomePods at £700 with their limitations in terms of audio, and something like this at £1,000, which is really audiophile quality. And that shows why the HomePod was way too expensive.
In the second part of our conversation with Kirk McElhearn about the HomePod, the conversation shifts to how we listen to music, how that's changed, and how that informs our purchase and use of some of these portable smart speakers, some of the non-portable smart speakers, and the online streaming services. That's next time on Mac Voices. I hope you'll join us. Until then, and as always, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with Mac Voices magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you Mac Voices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.